everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the Delphi trial transcript, and we are reading through Indiana versus Richard Allen in the homicides of Libby German and Abby Williams. And we are on the state's case. We're moving right along. We're on the state's case, part 8. And we are on the next witness, who is also law enforcement. We heard his name several times. This is former Indiana State Police crime scene investigator Duane Datzman. He was basically he was at the crime scene, one of the few people that were at the crime scene collecting evidence and taking pictures and whatnot. So it was a small team, and he was one of them. His name has come up multiple times, so we are getting into his testimony now. So please hit the like button and let's get started. So this is just picking up right where we left off. Mr. Luttrell says we'd call Duane Datzman. The witness is sworn in. The court says, Mr. Luttrell, could you retrieve your exhibit from the witness stand, please? Could you retrieve your exhibit from the witness stand, please? Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Court says, thank you. Now, the direct examination of Duane Datzman begins. And Mr. Luttrell says, state your name for the jury, please. Duane Datzman. The court says, could you spell your name for me, please? And he does. Where are you employed, sir? I'm sorry? Where are you employed? Currently, I'm employed with the Benton County Sheriff's Department as a special deputy courtroom security. Are you retired from the Indiana State Police? Yes, I am. When did you retire? 3 years and 1 month ago. And tell the jury about when you began with the Indiana State Police. What year was that? Well, I got accepted to the state police in 1987 and attended their police academy the fall of that year. And what assignment did you receive when you started at the state police? My first assignment was a road trooper. I was assigned to the Lowell District, patrolled Newton and Jasper County. I did that for 7 years, put in for promotion for corporal, sat that for 7 years, corporal doing desk duty, officer answering phones and supervising squads. Then, after that, I became a sergeant in the laboratory, where I spent the last 20 years of my career. So I'm sorry, I'll ask you to repeat yourself, and I think it's my fault, but how many years of crime scene investigator as a crime scene investigator? He says 20 years. Did you receive training to become eligible to be a crime scene investigator for the Indiana State Police? The witness says, I'm sorry, I'm having a very hard time hearing. This is just comical. Like, why do court systems not have audio that makes it easy for everyone to hear? I don't understand. They have audio systems, but it defeats the purpose if not everybody in the room can hear it. Did you receive training, sir, when you went from a corporal to becoming a crime scene investigator? In becoming a crime scene investigator, they had a month-long training program. You would go through different instructors for different scientific principles, whether it was firearms, arson investigations, homicides, lifting of fingerprints, and using alternate light sources, just about anything that you're going to be using in that particular field. They had a course for it. So we heard a lot about the using alternate light sources with the uh, last witness, who talked about illuminating the blood on the F tree and things like that with an alternate or with a spray of something, and then he used this alternate light source to illuminate it to see if it was in fact presumptive, if it tested presumptive for blood positive, and it looks like it seems that it is blood. Um, Okay. And was that followed by kind of on the field training, in field training with another crime scene investigator? I had a few scenes that I went with other investigators to see how they performed their duties. Well, how many crime scenes did you go to as a crime scene investigator those 16 years? I have no record of that. However, it numbers in the hundreds. How many homicide scenes, Mr. Datzman? I'm not sure of the number of homicides because they're all mixed in with the other death investigations, of which I had 200 death investigations. Explain that just for briefly. What do you mean by what is intended within death investigations? With a death investigation, we go to the scene to document it and collect the evidence. We do follow up by going to the autopsies and collecting, well, to the evidence we've collected at the scene. We take it to the laboratory where we package it and submit it for an examination. So, my next question was, what are the duties of a crime scene investigator? Did you just summarize those for the jury? Well, the duties of the crime scene, we hope other agencies, we go out to document the crime scenes, whether it's photography, videography, collection of blood, or any other things of evidentiary value, and submitting it to the laboratory. I direct your attention to February 14th, 2017. What was your job at that time? I was a crime scene investigator at that time and primarily working what counties? I worked part of the Lowell district, so I had Newton, Jasper, Pulaski, and then part of Lafayette's district, Benton, Warren, Fountain, Carroll, White. So you've worked Carroll County before? Yes, I have. And who contacted you to assist in this case? I don't recall who actually called me, just had a notification that there was a homicide in Carroll County and they were requesting my assistance at the scene. Do you remember where you were when you got that notice? I was at the Lafayette Post. And did you respond and go to the Delphi, Indiana area? Yes, I did. Do you know what time you arrived? I arrived at the scene where they wanted me to be at 1:11 p.m. And at the scene, would that be the cemetery you went to? Yes, we went to the cemetery to park our vehicles there. Well, what did you do next? After parking there at the cemetery, we crossed the trail. They directed me that the scene was down below, closer to the creek. Went down there. I could see that they had put up barrier tape, so I went down there and I met with Sergeant Olahi and Paige. Sergeant Olahi is our next witness, and he was, I assume, lead investigator. He was the one giving the orders at the crime scene, so I'm taking it that he's the lead here, at least in part, at the beginning of this investigation. And what was your first work that you did or role that you played once you arrived and conferred with Sergeant Olahi and Paige? After meeting with them and talking to them, I started off with some scene photography, starting out a little bit a ways from the scene, and we work our way in, taking closer and closer photos. So he was one of two photographers at least that day, because our last witness, Jason Page, the officer that he met with that day, was also taking photos, and he went through all of his photos and the angles that he took and things like that in the last in the last stream. Was there a point where you were notified that you were to leave that immediate crime scene area and do something else for a time? There was. I was asked to go down along the creek ahead of the water rescue team, make sure looking for any evidence that may be on the bank. But during that time, I received a call that says, come back to the cemetery area, because they wanted aerial photographs and they wanted me to go with the helicopter pilot. Oh, so they took a helicopter. Seriously, they took a helicopter to take aerial photos, but they couldn't do testing on key pieces of evidence and certain things like that. We're we're here. We're just spending money on helicopters. And did you do so? I did. And did you take photographs from the helicopter of various scenes around the Deer Creek area over where the bodies were located in the general area near the bridge? Yes, I did. But you indicated you took photographs of the crime scene itself as well. Yeah, I did. And how did you and Sergeant Page and Sergeant Olahy, how did you coordinate your efforts at the area immediately near the bodies? Being all pretty well experienced crime scene, we know what to do when we go to a scene. So we just started working, and if either or one of them had a request, I would help with that duty. So you don't communicate, you just start doing things. How do you know what to do first? I don't know. Like nobody communicates, let's cordon off it here and here, or like none of that is decided and then orders given. Isn't that how police officer structure works? There's a lead and then he gives the orders and then those other officers do what that person tells you. I don't know. Seems like that's what Sergeant Page, had testified to in his uh, recollection of the events. Anyways, so by the way, were you carrying a firearm and did you have any ammunition with you? No, I did not. Is that typical for you at a crime scene? For me, it is. The size of the firearms that we were issued at the time are very large, and you're wearing dress clothing, and you've got a skinny belt and this big holster. And to me, the holster was flapping around and the gun sticking you in the side because you're up and down so much from a kneeling position standing. So I just took my gun off and left it in the vehicle unless I felt the need for it. Okay. Is that Oh, here. Okay, good. This was pretty much my next question. That had become a practice of yours over the years? Yes, it is. So is that normal that cops will take their weapon off of themselves purposely? Disarm themselves? You didn't know your situation. How did you know that there wasn't still a threat in the area? And he put his gun in his vehicle? There's so many questions about this investigation. That's probably the least of them, but it doesn't register with me, but okay. So he says yes, that had become his common practice. And you followed that practice on that day? Yes. When you talk about being at the scene, are you familiar with the a phrase ground zero as it relates to this investigation? Yes, I do. And how did you define ground zero? Ground zero was right around the area of where the bodies were located, within several feet of the victims. And while you were present, let me back up. And I apologize. I'll restate my question. Do you know what time you would have arrived approximately at the crime scene? It would have been after 1:11. He said that already, because that's when I pulled into the parking lot, so maybe 10 minutes later. Then when did you leave? I believe I departed the scene that night. And then there's an unidentified individual who coughs. Thank you, clerk. What was the point of putting that in here? Seriously, this is ridiculous. Then he says, I'm sorry. Then he says, what time did you depart the scene, if you recall? It was around 10:30 p.m. So you took a number of photographs, correct? I did. I'm going to show you some of those. For the record, I'm going to show you States Exhibit 64 to 77 inclusive. Ask you if you would look at those, and in fact, I've shown you those today, have I not? Yes, you have. Are those photographs that you personally took yourself? I'll let you go ahead and keep. Yeah, yes, these are photographs that I had taken at the scene. And the majority of these were taken on February 14th, 2017. That's correct. And maybe the last two were taken the following day, if you recall. I don't recall, but well, do they truly and accurately reflect the locations that you observed and that are depicted in these photographs? They do. I would move to the admission of 64 through 77. State's exhibits were offered. No objection, says Baldwin. Court says all right without objection. 64 to 77 inclusive are admitted. Mr. Latrell says, thank you, Your Honor. We would like to publish them to the jury at this time. She says, you may, and they are. We'll begin, Sergeant, with the aerial photos that you took. Could you describe for the jury what this photo depicts? This is above Deer Creek, looking to the east. There's a residence on the south side that I believe the driveway ends there at the house from where they had access to. And you can't really see much else because of the trees. I'm going to ask you if you would be okay with coming down. Yes. And I'll give you a pointer as we ask some other questions about the other photographs. For the record, you've just identified 64. If I could ask you to stand off to the side so the jury is not obstructed. Court says even further over, sir. So can you see now? Okay, there you go. If you have to adjust to get in the way, if you just move back, that's fine. We'll try to keep it so the jury can see. Exhibit 65, what do we see here? What does this depict? Well, once again, this is over the wooded area where we have a water rescue team down here searching the creek, and it's very hard to tell, but we have a crime scene tape or a rope going through there. Sir, you're going to need to speak up. You need to speak up, says Judge Gull. He says, and I'm not sure looking at this photo, this may be the location of the victims. All right, so you indicated the water rescue team. Is that those individuals in the red and bright colored neon yellow helmets? Yes, it is. And would that show, at least in the portion where they're standing, the relative depth of the creek at that location? Yes, it would. This next photograph is Exhibit 66, again, another aerial view. Would you point out the Deer Creek that's shown in the photograph? This is Deer Creek running here. This and that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. This would be upstream side going up this way. So coming to across to the down, right, the down rightward would be downstream. Is rightward a question or a word? And he says, yes, this would be downward. And can you locate the bodies of Libby and Abby in this photograph? The bodies of the victims are down here, right next to the base of this tree. There's one here and one here. Would you point that again? Would you point that again? And where is Libby and where is Abby? I'm not sure which one is which for their names, but we have one of them here and we have one over here. Okay, one is clothed and one is unclothed. That's correct, and they're both laying on their backside. And that's how you had seen them? Even before you'd taken the helicopter ride, you took these photos. Yes, that was okay. Did you have difficulty in seeing where they were, even though you had been there to the scene? It was difficult from the helicopter to see down through those trees, and we had an officer down on the ground using the strobe function on a light, trying to get our attention as to where he was in close at as close to the where he was at close to the victims. I don't know. That's the words that's on the page. Those are the words. I'm just reading the words. That's what the court clerk wrote down. Whether that's what was said or not, I don't know. And despite that, it was still difficult. Yes, it was. Now you said initially when you arrived, you approached from the cemetery. And did you take a photograph from the edge of the cemetery heading down towards the crime scene? Yes, I did. Look at State's Exhibit 67. What does that depict? The view from the top. You have the upper edge of the forest here. And let me interrupt you, where is the cemetery from where you were standing taking this photograph? I'm facing the creek. The cemetery would be behind me. Okay. So you can see down below Deer Creek's over here. This ground goes down one more level, and we have to go down another one to the very bottom, the creek bottom. Photograph 68, what does that show? This shows the two victims there in their final resting position, and there are some sticks placed over their bodies. Photograph 69. This is from the kind of the opposite side from more from their head to their toes perspective. That's correct. At least from Abby's standpoint. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Exhibit 70. Again, from a similar angle but more closer to the scene, did you examine or observe any blood in the location of on the ground near the bodies? Yes, I did. There is a blood pool or what appeared to be a blood pool right here, he says. Using your photography, were you wanting to document and capture the condition of the bodies and any blood spatters that you saw at the scene, on the bodies or elsewhere? Is that correct? That's correct. The next photograph is a close-up view of Abby Williams. What does that depict? Did he not just say? He says that depicts the neck injury on Abby Williams and blood staining. Not sure which way the blood's flowing. I am not an expert in blood spatter, but it shows the injury to the neck. I'm showing you photograph 72, Mr. Datzman. Did you look again at the bodies for locations of blood? What does that depict? Sorry about that. I had a little frog in my throat or something. Very difficult to swallow and talk. All right, we're back. So, this shows. Sorry. So, what does this photograph 72 depict? Well, this shows that there's nothing up here on her foot, but down here at the heel, you see blood, and then underneath her leg, it travels up. There's some blood stains up there. And you're pointing to the right leg, and that would be the right upper thigh and side of the right calf? Yes, it would be. Sir, did you, in assisting or working with the team that you were working with, did any of them use any equipment once it became dark to try to enhance your ability to examine the scene and the victims' bodies? Yes, they did. They used an alternate light source, a blue light. And who did that? I believe Sergeant Page did. And what were you doing when that was being used? I was standing close to the body. I did not have yellow or orange shield for my eyes to block out the blue light, so I was just observing them moving the blue light around the body. And what happened next? As they were moving the blue light around, I kept seeing a glitter down in the leaves, and the light would go by and I'd see it, then it'd be gone. I said, "Send the light back over here. Let me take a look again." They couldn't see it because they're wearing the orange goggles. And once I saw where it was, I turned my flashlight on and fanned away the leaves from where the. What do you mean you fanned away the leaves? I just brushed away the leaves from whatever was laying under the leaves that was causing the glitter. In other words, he disturbed the crime scene, the evidence, if this is supposed evidence. And what level of pressure or physical movement did you use as you fanned that area? It was very light. I did not want to disturb anything underneath it. You brushed the leaves away with your hand, yet you didn't want to disturb anything. How is that not disturbing anything? And did you move anything at all when you did that? Just the leaves. And what did you see? Well, underneath those leaves, there we found a .40 caliber cartridge. So, looking at States Exhibit 73, you're standing a lot closer than we are. Can you tell the jury where that cartridge was observed if it's captured in photo 73? The cartridge is right here. You can see a little bit of dirt, and it's located right in the center of that. And you just see the head stamp of the cartridge. Is that what had glittered? Yes, it was. The next photograph, photograph 74, what does it depict? Once again, this is a photograph of the cartridge kind of stuck in the ground, just right in there. You can still see the base of it, the head stamp, and the lower part of the cartridge. Photograph 75. This photograph here is still the same cartridge. It's a little bit, closer up view of it. You can still see the head stamp, the primer. The primer's not been fired, so it's an intact cartridge. An intact cartridge? Yes, not fired. I'm sure there might be some time during this course of this trial that someone will say bullet. Technically, what is a bullet, sir, as opposed to a cartridge? A cartridge is made of several components. You can have the primer in the back of the casing, and casing holds the powder, and then some sort of projectile is impressed on the other end of the cartridge casing. So all those components together are a bullet. And the once you noted that and brushed away, fanned away the leaves, and these photographs were taken, what happened to the cartridge? It was collected. Collected by whom? I believe Sergeant Olahy. Were there any cartridges located anywhere at Ground Zero that day? Any other cartridges? He says, no, there was not. Are you sure? Did you look? This area is notorious for people going out there and hunting, shooting things. So, how do we even know that this is Richard Allen's gun or bullet? Or casing, cartridge, what they call it. Were there any other cartridges? He says, no, located anywhere within the crime scene. He says, no, we found no other cartridges. So the total number of ammunition that was collected that day was one. That's correct. And which one was it? This 40 caliber right here. Does he have the piece of evidence? Or, well, I guess he's pointing to that picture. He doesn't have the actual bullet with him, does he? It was in Sergeant Olahy's role to be the collector of evidence and documenting each item of evidence that was collected. That's correct. Your photographs and other photographs have shown that there were sticks on the bodies of Abby Williams and Liberty German. Is that correct? That's correct. And you looked at those and saw those? I'm sorry? You examined those sticks, is that correct? Yes, we did. Was that something that you participated in? Yes, it was. And were they, in a systematic process, removed one by one from first Libby and then Abby as you were documenting the scene? They were. And were those sticks set aside in some location? Yes, they were. There at the scene? Yes. Sergeant Page set them off to the side, out of the way, so nobody would step on them. Step on them? You're gonna. Okay. Now, at this point, you had been a crime scene investigator for 13 years, 14 years. It'd be 16 years. At the time that you did, yes, this investigation. And in doing so, did you, the three of you, discuss what to do with those sticks? We did. And did you ultimately leave them there at the scene? Did you ultimately leave them there at the scene when you had examined them? That's correct. He didn't, they didn't collect any of the sticks. Like I said, they didn't collect the sticks. They didn't think it was evidence. And why did you do that, Mr. Datzman? Well, we had flipped the sticks over. We saw no blood or anything on them, and they were very rough or crumbly. Some of them had the like moss or lichen growing on them, which it fell off. So between the three of us, we're talking about this thing in all of the experience. We've never gotten any DNA off such a surface as this. So we decided at the time that they were of no evidentiary value, and we just left them there stacked. Really? Okay, so even if all your experience and years combined, you've never figured out how to get DNA off of a stick, don't you think you could try? Like, still collect them and then figure out if you need them later, instead of just leaving them behind? This makes zero sense to me. These law enforcement officers made some really poor choices in their investigation. That's all I want to say. So if you believed that they might be of evidentiary value, what would you have done? We would have collected them, like the rest of the evidence, and taken it into the laboratory for further examination. The is the role of the crime scene investigator in working with the laboratory to examine for what would be reasonable to submit to the laboratory for their testing? That's correct. And in your judgment, was it reasonable, best practice to collect those sticks and submit them to the lab? Was it, in your opinion, best practice to take them to the laboratory? In my opinion, it didn't. There was an evidentiary value to them. You later returned to the scene, I believe on March 3rd of 2017, and you collected the sticks? That's correct. February 13th and 14th. 13th is when they go missing. The 14th is when the girls are found. And now it is March 3rd. Weeks have gone by, and we're just now going back and collecting the sticks. The elements have been on those sticks. Any rain thing, water can do, any of that can disintegrate the value of your DNA sample. If you were going to get a DNA sample off of a difficult surface like a stick, you're not going to get it now after it's sitting in the elements for 2, 3 weeks. And how do you know that you collected the sticks that were removed from the bodies of Libby and Abby? I knew where Sergeant Page had placed them, and before I went out to the scene, I printed off a couple copies of photographs of the sticks so I could identify them by their shape, and with that information, went out and collected those sticks. I still question, are they the right sticks? Because how do you know? How do you know? And where did you take them? I'm sorry, where'd I take them? Where did you take them from that scene on March 3rd? I believe I took them to the Lafayette Post. Were they placed in a storage area where other oversized items of evidence are kept? Yes, they are. Not in a traditional evidence room, but in a locked facility where it'd be more practical to keep them. That's correct. Let's go back to February 14th. You indicated to the jury that you remained there from approximately 1:11 upon your arrival to the general area and departed around 10:30. That's correct. Had the bodies of Libby and Abby been removed at that time? Yes, they'd been removed before our departure. And so you continued to assist and work with your colleagues, Sergeant Page and Sergeant Olahi, until such time as they had been moved and you did some further investigation of the scene. Is that correct? That is correct. Did you return the following day on February 15th, 2017? Yes, we did. And what did you do at the crime scene area, both the ground zero and the larger area of within the yellow tape? What did you do in that location on the 15th? We went back and used our metal detectors again, searching a little bit wider area to see if we could find anything else of evidentiary value. And did you go ultimately across to the other side of the creek and examine in the afternoon or evening of the 15th, examine the area as well? Yes, I did. The next photo, 76. What does this depict, sir? This is what they call the Monon High Bridge. I believe we're at the east end looking west. So you're at the opposite end of the bridge from the trail, the Monon Trail. Is that correct? That's correct. I believe you can see a little bit of the trail down there at the end. Kind of turns to the right, and then you step off of this onto another gravel path, barely gravel. And photograph 77, what does it depict? It's a disturbance in the soil going down from the old railroad bed down to the gravel drive down here. This is like the slide or whatever they found in mud that they think, could have been a struggle. Did you examine this area and other areas across the creek, the ground, for any shoe impressions? That I did. On this particular one, I walked out the outside of it, trying to see if there was any shoe impressions in that black dirt, and we found just a partial one somewhere up in here. Had you had information that there'd been other individual searchers the day before, the 13th, and the morning of the 14th in that area? I did hear that information that searchers actually maybe even climbed through the dirt looking for the girls. Did you find ultimately, either on this side of the creek or on the other side of the creek, any shoe impression that you believed were of evidentiary value? No, I did not. When you're looking at shoe impressions, what are some key components of that? What are some major factors that you consider? Well, they have what we call class characteristics. You may have a pair of Nikes, and even in different sizes, it'll have the same characteristics, the same style, tread, and design on the bottom. But then you get afterwear, you get nicks and cuts. So you have individual characteristics in that, and that would separate one shoe from another depending on the type of wear, how it was worn, and if it was damaged. And in your judgment, did you find any prints that would help you find more individualized characteristics that you could use them forensically? No, I did not. You may return to your seat, Sergeant. I thank you. I have no further questions. The court says, can we take a break? We need to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been here over 2 hours, and I'm going to go ahead and take a real quick break, give you an opportunity to get up and move around again. While you're outside of the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Don't form any opinions or conclusions about anything. You may discuss the evidence that you've heard so far, but please only if all 16 of you are present in the jury room at the time, and then please don't deliberate, she says. Gentlemen, the bailiff says all rise. The jury is out of the room at 3:10 p.m. We are back now. The court says, all right, let's resume at 3:30, folks. Oh, we're not back yet. That's the court excusing the attorneys. Jody, you can go off the record. They go off the record, and we're back. Mr. Baldwin says, Judge, is it okay if I stand here while the jury's coming in? That sentence is just very problematic, but cool. Is it okay if I stand here? That's the wrong here, and that's not it. But this reporter who has made a severe number of errors in these documents that I can tell. Just so far, we're only on the state's case part 8, but and somebody, I think it was Sleuthy Goosey, somebody on X said that there's 422 inaudibles that she puts in the transcript. So she didn't hear what people said and didn't get clarification and just left it as an inaudible. I shouldn't say she, they, whoever did the court reporting in any of these. There might be multiple court reporters. I'm not sure, but somebody dropped the ball here is all I'm saying. All right, so the court says, sure, all rise. Jury is back in the room. The bailiff says, thank you. You may be seated. The court says, thank you, gentlemen. I'm just going to give them a minute to get settled. All right, Mr. Baldwin, you may proceed, he says. Thank you. I know that you are retired, so how should I address you? You can just address me by my first name, Duane. Duane. Okay, thank you, Duane. Would you agree with me that a bullet found at a crime scene should be photographically documented? Yes. Okay. We'll talk about the bullet found at the crime scene. That should be photographically documented. It was. Okay. And it should be photographically documented for one reason, so the jury can make sure that the bullet that was found on the ground is the same bullet that they ultimately see at trial when it's admitted in as a piece of evidence. Would you agree with that? Yes. Okay. Because well, strike that. And would you agree with me that one way to do that would be to videotape as a bullet is coming out, as somebody was picking that bullet up and taking it out of the ground, and then showing it on the video at different angles? No, I would not agree to that. So no one wants to agree that you should have probably taken pictures of collecting it and making and taken more detailed photographs of it or video of it. He says no. Mr. Baldwin says, really? Yes. When you pick that up, you risk doing some kind of damage to it. It's better just to package that right away, and if you go back to the laboratory and then photograph it in a safe environment. Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. We wanted that answer. He says, okay. But by the time you get to the library, we don't know what the tip of the bullet, for example, we don't know what the tip of that bullet looked like as it was in the ground, right? No. Okay. So is it much of a problem to take it out and videotape so that we can see what the color of the tip of the bullet is? Be better to photograph it, he says. Okay, well, let's do that. Yeah. Would it be difficult to take the bullet out and photograph it so the tip of the bullet can be seen? No, it would not be difficult. And that would be a wise thing to do, again, so the jury can be assured that the bullet that's taken out of the ground is the same bullet that they're going to be seeing once it is admitted into evidence, presuming that it is. Would you agree? Yes. And just before I finish up, because the projectile part of the bullet, you said what we saw in the photograph was I'm not a guy, but the back part of the bullet, what do you call that? The very end of it, where the primer's at, is called the head stamp. It gives the caliber and the company that manufactured it. Okay, so we see the head stamp, but the tip of it, is it okay to call it a bullet? Yes. The tip of the bullet, they have different colors? Yes, they do. They're made out of different substances, like copper? Correct. Okay, so all right. And does the Law Enforcement Academy, I believe it does, teach you to document things that are important at a crime scene? Yes. Okay, is this case, you did not document that the clothes on Abby Williams were damp, did you? I did not. Okay. That could be an important piece of information. Should the clothing be damp versus dry? Would you agree? Yes. Okay. Now, does the fact that you did not document that the clothing was damp mean that you did not notice that the clothing was damp? Correct. Thank you. You said a second ago on direct examination that the shoes, you did not see any shoes in the ground of any shoe prints in the ground of any evidentiary value is the word you used. Do you remember saying that? Correct. But wasn't there some shoe print that you saw that you thought looked similar to the one of the victim's shoes? That was the one partial footwear impression on the trail up there in the black dirt. Okay. There's not much of an impression left there. Okay. So the one on the black dirt you think looks similar to one of the shoes of one of the victims. That's Sergeant Olahy said that they looked similar to the girl's shoes and they have a resemblance to it, the pattern. Okay. Did you see the shoes of a small adult male also next to the shoe imprints of the shoe of a potential victim? No, I did not. Well, that's key because Richard Allen probably has smaller feet because he's a smaller male, small adult male, and his shoe prints were not there. What I'm doing is I'm weeding out questions, so you'll probably like that. So now, what was it your guys's jobs? Hate that language. It's so not grammatically correct. Was it your guys' jobs at CSI to take like the depth of the creek at various points? Would that be something that you guys would have done, or is that somebody else? Somebody else may have done it, but it wouldn't have been one of the things I would have done. Okay. And I was writing something down as you were talking. Did you say that you'd taken some photographs that you could kind of tell that what some of the depths were in the creek? Did I hear you say that? No, I didn't say that. Sorry. My throat is dry again. Okay, all right. You don't know what the levels of any of the areas of the creek were. You didn't go in there and do it. That is, I'm guessing what you're saying. No, I did not enter the creek, and I don't know if the water team took any measurements or not. Would you agree with me that in all of your years of experience, this was a very odd crime scene to come upon? No. No? Had you ever been to a crime scene where sticks were arranged in a certain pattern on one of the girls? No, I have not. Okay, but that happened here, right? Mr. Luttrell says, objection to the word arranged. That's speculation. Sustained. You said on direct examination that you did not collect the sticks that were found on the girls, correct? That's correct. And you found that you did not collect them because they did not have, in your opinion, evidentiary value. That is correct, due to the nature of the surface of those sticks being crumbly. But not all the sticks were crumbly. For the most part, they were rough textured, not something smooth enough to work with. Well, certainly, when something is smooth, that means that skin cells, epithelial cells, would end up on that item, right? It's possible. Is that why somebody told you guys to go back and get those sticks? I do not know why they told me to go back and get them. Well, it was a mistake not to get those sticks, don't you think? Not to take them initially? I don't think so. But somebody above you in the chain of command said, I have no idea who asked or requested for us to go out to collect the sticks. Well, I mean, somebody, a human being, had to have picked those sticks up with their hands and placed those on the girls, right? Correct. Arranged or not arranged, placed. Really, Judge? Correct. And when they do that, again, their skin cells would be on it. If not, unless they're wearing gloves, then there wouldn't be any transfer. Well, was the guy wearing gloves? I have no idea. And that's the point because you didn't take it, you didn't test it, you didn't even try. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you should have collected the sticks, right? They were collected. How much later? A couple days. A couple days. You talked a little bit about the blood spatter on at least on Libby's face. Is that correct? Is that correct? Okay, so again, not just a couple days. It was like a couple weeks. Is that correct? On direct made note of it. Yes, blood spatter on Libby's face. But you said I'm not a blood spatter expert. That's correct. But the state police does have blood spatter experts in its employ, correct? Correct. And I would presume, because you thought there was an unusual blood spatter, at least on Libby's face, if not other places, it would be smart to get the blood spatter person out there to examine the crime scene? Not necessarily. Oh my God, they just doubled down on their mistakes, their I don't want to say misconduct, but they definitely made some choices during their investigation that are being questioned, and now that they're being questioned, they're doubling down on the things that they did. He says the photographs taken of it, the blood was dry already, so it's there. You can make a determination of blood flow or whatever they do from the photographs. Well, at the tree where there is a pattern, or, well, I don't know if it's a pattern, but there is some blood on one of the trees. Somebody called it an F tree. Have you heard of that? Yes, I've heard of that. Okay, would it be wise to get the blood spatter out there to the F tree to analyze? Better than photographs. Would you agree? Get someone out there to do it? No, he says. You don't agree. No, I think photographs document it well enough. Really? So a blood spatter expert doesn't benefit from being there at the scene and in person? I would think that they would. I would think that someone who's not a blood spatter expert, like this guy who has already said he wasn't, wouldn't exactly know what they're looking for and might miss some things. So blood spatter expert might have been important here. All right. So the photographs document how thick the bark is? It would give you, what do you mean how thick the bark is? Well, you said the photographs do just as good a job, so I'm wondering. I'd want to know probably how thick the bark is where the blood was on the tree. Objection. That's speculation. The fact that Mr. Baldwin might want to know that doesn't mean that a blood spatter expert would. Sustained. Well, you said that the photographs would be just as good as the blood spatter expert being there. He's just using the photographs, correct? Correct. Does the photograph detail the texture of the bark on the tree? The photograph shows that. All right. So you think waiting 7 years for a blood spatter expert to get on, if that's what happened, would be an appropriate amount of time? I have no idea. Okay. You said that there were people. Part of the problem with the prints was that there were people searching both on the 13th, correct, in and around the area. Yes. And on the 14th as well. That's correct. It's hard to differentiate which shoes were of the searchers that were near the scene of the crime versus those that the person might be the killer as well. That's correct. Were you aware of any, we'll strike that, were you aware of any items, sticks, or any other items that were left behind that did have blood on them? There may have been small sticks and leaves around the area. Okay, what about bigger sticks with blood on them? I don't recall any bigger sticks with blood on them. I mean, if there were larger sticks with blood on them, they should have been collected on the 13th. Would you agree? If they were of value, we would have. I'm sorry? I think if they were of some kind of evidentiary value, we could have collected that or would have collected that. It's blood on a stick, evidentiary value in that, right? Yes. Correct? Yes. At some point in time, did you ever, as CSI folk, ever get asked to kind of walk the path of the suspected path of the killer to look for evidence? In this particular case? In this particular case, yes. We can only guesstimate where they might have walked and try to search that area, make sure that we didn't miss anything there. And I appreciate that. And so we're talking about from down the hill where that slide mark is, down the access road, right? Right. Then you went down farther and around, and you looked around there for footprints and other things as well. That's correct. Okay. And then you didn't cross the river yourself, did you? Not through the water. Okay. But on the other side also, where between the creek and where the bodies were found, you would have walked there and looked around and made sure that there was nothing that is, and we've got our first inaudible of the day. That's correct. Okay. But what about north of where the girls' bodies were found, where the person may have left? Were you around asked to look sorry, were you asked to follow that track of the of the killer, possible track of the killer? Going north from there, we had been up through there several times. Okay. And as part of what you did as a CSI and others, they were looking for the guy whoever killed guy or whoever or people whoever killed the girls. If they went north, you went to check that way. That's correct. Okay. What about once you got up into, were you ever asked to go onto 300 North and follow a track of where the killer may have traveled on 300 North for shoe prints or any other types of evidence? 300 North, is that the road in front of the cemetery running east and west? Yes. No, we didn't look for anything up there. Did anybody ask you to look on that track? No, they did not. Okay. As you head westbound on 300 North, did they ask you to look anywhere for any type of evidence along that route? We had been through from the bridge up that trail back out to 300. We went through there, and another trooper pointed out an old t shirt out in the woods and that we collected. Okay. But once you get onto 300 North, which is right in front of the cemetery, you were not asked to do any further CSI work, if you will, in that area north of 300 North. I had no request made to me to search that area. Were any of the other areas across the road, behind the barn, behind Hoosier Harvest Store, none of that? Nobody came to ask me and asked me to search it. No one came to me and asked me to search it, he says. Would you have done that if they asked you? Yes. So the last question on this is so if somebody had come to you and said, hey, we think that the person that killed these girls went around some buildings and along this path, would you walk that path just to see if there's anything there? You would have done that? If it had been brought to my attention, I would have. Do you have anything to do with collecting evidence at the Brad Weber property across? Do you even know who Brad Weber is? No, I don't. Okay, I'll move on then. Okay. That private drive that goes under the bridge. Yes. You know what I'm talking about? Did you look for tire marks and see if there were any tire marks that were inconsistent with the owner of that house's vehicles? Did not see any tire marks, and that's a gravel path or driveway, and I didn't see any tire marks in there. Okay. Did you see any footprints from that access road when you go down the hill and then you went down to the creek? Did you see any footprints, like three sets of footprints, anything resembling three sets of footprints all the way to the creek at all? No, I didn't observe any extra sets of footwear impressions there. What was the temperature of the girls, each of them individually, their body temperature at the time that you were there doing your CSI work? I do not know. We did not test that. Okay, you should have tested their body temperature. No, no, no. They test body temperature, core temperature rectally, and due to the chance of being assayed, you don't want to be inserting anything else and losing that potential for evidence there. Yeah, that might make sense. My mom used to put the thermometer under my armpit. Objection to what his mother used to do. Sustained. Did you ever put a thermometer under the girl's armpits? No. To find out what their core temperature was. No, we have not. Okay. Do you have a CVS in town where you could have received your... Not from here, are you? No. Okay. If there was a CVS in town, could you have gone to one and gotten some type of thermometer to put under their arms? Not for that, because determining core temperature, there are so many variables involved. What are you hoping to find from core temperature? Time of death. You would not get time of death from that due to the variables that the air temperature, the bodies are in the shade, the sun, are they clothed or nude, wet, the moisture from the ground, and just is more information better than less information? Yes. What about to the touch? Did you touch the skin of the girls to find out how cold they were or if they were even cold? I did not. Maybe one of the other CSIs did. Do they touch you in CSI or teach sorry, do they teach you in CSI school how to calculate the rate of decline in body temperature based upon a lot of variables? Not that I recall. I'm going to hand you what I think was marked as, what did you say? Ms. Auger says 41. He says 41. Have you seen that photograph or are you familiar with that? I believe I've seen it before. My question is, do you know if Exhibit 41, the sticks, do they look to be covered in blood? Correct? They are. They are covered in blood. Do you know if those sticks were collected? No, I do not know that for a fact. Okay, would you agree with me that they should be collected since they have blood on them? Not necessarily. If they took a blood sample or swabbed some of this blood on the ground, made a collection from it, the stick is theirs. It's probably got the same blood on it. We can't be picking up every stick, every leaf that's in the forest there just because it might have a drop of blood on it. But I believe check with the other CSI, he might tell you that he collected blood from that. Okay. Well, you were talking about the different variables that are in play when it comes to determining body temperature or and time of death. Strike that. Different variables that are in play when it comes to time of death. One of those being core body temperature. You said sunlight and other things, correct? Yes. One of those variables might be just what's the air temperature at the time that you were there, correct? The bodies were already cooled off by then. That did not answer the question. You're avoiding the question now because you don't want to take criticism for not taking the temperature. I know. But when it comes to analyzing the rate of body temperature declined, and it would be good to know what the temperature was at the time that you guys arrived as part of that analysis. I don't believe in this instance it would have. Do you know if anybody took the temperature knew what the temperature was? The ambient air temperature? Yes. I had like 41 degrees at one point, or at 1 o'clock when I pulled in there. 41 degrees at on the 13th. No, 14th. Oh, on the 14th. Duh. Okay. Thank you. 41 degrees when you arrived at 1 o'clock on the 14th. Yes. And your main job there was to preserve and collect evidence and document evidence. Would you agree? That's correct. You have no idea whether those girls have ever crossed that creek. Would you agree? I'm sorry, what? Yeah, you have no idea whether those girls ever crossed that creek. Not to be completely sure about it. Okay. You don't have any idea of when those girls even got to where they ultimately were. Where they were found? Where they were found. No, I do not. I just wanted to review some of the things you did collect and see if you remember collecting them, okay? There was another bra collected somewhere. Is that something that you collected? I did not collect that. Okay, are you familiar with a bra being collected? I saw it in the report somewhere, somebody's report. A pink colored sock, did you collect that? No, I did not. A shirt on the bank in the same area. Do you remember collecting the shirt? No, I had no part of that. A Jimmy John's drink cup with a straw in it. I did recover that. Okay. And it looked like it had been used, right? It was fairly used. It was not weathered, crinkled, or discolored. It looked like it was within a couple of days, maybe the most. So it was fairly new. Okay. And sometimes we hear about people that are sip on a straw and you can get their DNA off the straw. Correct. Was that one of the reasons you collected it? Yes. And you don't know what happened to it, but you collect it and then it moves on. And whether that ended up having something on it or not, you don't know. Is that true? Usually not. Okay, there was an energy drink. Yeah, that looked like it was not too old. Yeah, same way. It was another energy drink can. I believe it was a can. A Camel cigarette butt. Yes, there was a couple of cigarette butts on the right on the entrance to the bridge area. They looked fresh, like they had not been weathered, had not been run over, stepped on, or anything like that, so we collected those. The area that those girls were found is relatively flat, would you agree? No. You don't agree? No. Where the bodies were laid. That ground undulates down there. You've got high spots, low spots, and it's not flat like you'd find a field or yard. Sure. Well, I guess compared to like coming down from the cemetery, that's a pretty steep grade there, right? That's correct. And from the to the west of there, where the girls were maybe 100 more yards, that's a pretty steep decline there as well. That's correct. So compared to those, this was a pretty flat area. Compared to that, yes, it is. Thank you. No other questions. Court says, Mr. Luttrell. Mr. Luttrell says, thank you, Your Honor. Redirect of Duane Datzman. Mr. Luttrell says, Mr. Datzman, where did you find the Jimmy John's cup that you collected? It was at the west end of the bridge on right-hand side of the weeds or growth. And that would be the area where the trail ends at the bridge. The public trail ends at the bridge, the opposite side of where you took your bridge photo that you showed the jury. Is that correct? Yes. The opposite end. Yes. And were the cigarettes? I think your testimony was at the entrance to the bridge, the cigarette butts that you collected. That's correct. That would be at the same general area? Yes, it was. So the public side or trail side of the bridge that you collected those items. That's correct. So what? The perpetrator couldn't have walked there? Would the energy drink be the same? The energy drink was also found in that area? Yes, it was. What's the word core mean when you talk about core temperatures? Like the center of the body. That means intruding into the body to get taken, correct? That's correct. You can't get core temperature from something underneath an arm in an armpit. I would agree. That's not the definition of core. No. Would you agree? I agree. Who gives a crap? Get a temperature anyways in the armpit. Uh, would you agree that the best way to track an item of evidence, a cartridge, or anything else is to place it in a container separate from other items of evidence, adequately mark it, and get it to where it's supposed to go undisturbed? That's correct. In your 16 years or more as a crime scene investigator, did you ever stop and videotape the collection or picking up of an item of evidence on the ground? I've not videotaped it. I've photographed stuff on the ground. Photographed. But the act of picking it up, did you ever videotape that act? Not to videotape the actual picking up of an item, no. Was there anything about this case that would suggest you do something different than you've done for 16 years as a crime scene investigator? No, there was not. Mr. Luttrell has no further questions. We are going into recross with Mr. Baldwin. If you had to do it all over again, would you have taken a photograph of the other end of the bullet so that this jury would know that that's the same bullet that they receive into evidence that this was taken out of the ground? If I had to do it, I imagine I would have gotten a picture of the bullet after pulled out and then it goes to the lab. Thank you, sir. Omitted question, Your Honor. Omitted question. The court says an omitted question? Sure. Oh, he must have forgot a question. So we're back to redirect. Yeah, Mr. Luttrell forgot a question. So he says, you were asked a question on cross examination, and I meant to follow it up. And I apologize that I didn't, but real quickly, here, I'm going to show you some images. I'm going to show you States Exhibit 183 and 184 and ask if they are, in fact, images that you took but zoomed in to show the creek in a more closer fashion 160, 183, and 184. Yeah, it shows the creek and the water rescue team while they were searching that area. It shows the water rescue team in the creek? Yes, it does. I would move the admission of 183 and 184. Any objection? No. Says Baldwin. The court says all right without objection. They are admitted. Mr. Luttrell says, Your Honor, we would ask leave to make copies for the jury and publish them that way later. She says, that's fine, you may. Mr. Luttrell says, thank you. Ms. Diener says, Jim? He says, oh. The court says, oh, so you have copies. All right, you may publish. Mr. Luttrell says, they're similar photographs, Your Honor, but for the jury's clarification, there's two. They are two distinct photos. Anything else, Mr. Luttrell? No, Your Honor. All right, do you have any cross on the omitted question? Mr. Baldwin says, I do. 1 second. So he says, sorry, Judge, I do. And now we've got a little brief recross here. Do you know the height of any of those people in the photographs? No, I do not. And do you know if they walked another 3 or 4 feet towards the bank across the way, if they would fall into into deeper water? They could have. No other questions. The court says, does anybody on the jury have any questions for Mr. Datzman? So we got a brief sidebar and questions for this witness. He says, Mr. McLeland says, I'm just curious of the questions. The court says, oh, you're fine. That's fine. Quote, the defense mentions that it would be helpful to show or capture the entire bullet of the crime scene to help the jury identify if it's the same bullet. So that's not really a question. Would there be any reason that the bullet submitted to evidence would be a different bullet? Mr. Luttrell says, I like the question. Mr. Baldwin says, no, it's a good question. Mr. McLeland says, fair question. The court says, is there a process to ensure that the jury is seeing evidence that is not tampered? Mr. Baldwin says, if he knows. The court says, you want me to couch it if he knows? Is that what you said? Mr. Baldwin says, no, I'm just, if you want to, that's better. Mr. Luttrell says, either way, I don't care. Court says, okay, now this is in front of the jury, and to the witness, the court asks, sir, would there be any reason that the bullet submitted to evidence would be a different bullet? No, it'd be the same bullet found at the scene as the bullet that would be packaged and sent to the laboratory. Well, maybe, if they're not trying to frame an innocent man, perhaps, but we don't know that. Any follow-up, Mr. Luttrell? No. Mr. Baldwin? No. Is there a process to ensure that the jury is seeing evidence that is not tampered with? The witness says, could you repeat that, please? Is there a process to ensure that the jury is seeing evidence that is not tampered with? We have policies and regulations that we follow for the collection and submission of evidence, and we have a chain of custody. So if I find something, package it, I take it to the laboratory, I sign it over to the evidence clerk, and she signs it into the evidence system. It has a number, a location, so a case number on it, so you can go back and find the exact piece of evidence. Any follow up, Mr. Luttrell? He says, are items identified by a specific number under the specific case? Yes, they are. And are they submitted to the laboratory in a sealed condition? In a sealed condition, yes, they are. If not in a sealed condition, would the laboratory refuse to receive them? They would have the officer repackage the item if they hadn't done it properly. I have no further questions. Mr. Baldwin says no questions. The court says, thank you, Mr. Datzman. You may step down. The witness says, thank you. The court says, you may call your next witness. And Mr. Luttrell calls Brian Olahi, which we will continue tomorrow. We'll get to him Monday. Sorry, Monday. Tomorrow is Saturday for you. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out if you haven't done so already. And let me know in the comments below what you think about this trial so far. And I'll see you guys later. Bye, guys.